ask you to do something some of you are probably not comfortable with, and that's not take notes today. Just going to have a conversation. And listen, I can't force you. So if you're one of the kind of people that have to take notes, I get it, but you have the recordings. But it's more important you understand that it's not even a trick. It's like an illusion, but not with joint motions, but with the topic of conversation of today. And that's how muscles truly influence our joint motions. And I'll give grace to validate that it's kind of one of those things, once you get it, you're good. But it might take people different amounts of time to unlock getting it. I'll give you an example. How many of you were riding a bicycle when you were really young? Not me. Like, I was like 13 years old before I learned to bike. I was a little slow at things. But it's one of those things where, like, you're overthinking sometimes. I can see that in school and life and tasks. And here's my brother telling me, lean this way, and when you do this, you do this. And I'm like, and my mom's, telling me things, and my sister's telling me things, my dad's telling me. And it was one of those where it just clicks, and you're like, I got it, right? And like they say, like, once you can ride a bike, you can always ride it. But it wasn't all the advice. It was just eventually you got to figure it out. And that's the concept of today's lecture. Muscles are overly simplified by our use of them in everyday activities, everyday living. It's not that they're complex. It's that they are overly simplified in what I call the bro science. We have to remember, you are classically trained in kinesiology studies. I mean, you're getting a degree in it. Many of you are going to be getting advanced degrees. But you're going to be talking with people who apply this knowledge all the time in their activities of daily living. And we have had this information applied to us in our activities of daily living by our friends, by our family members. And so bad verbiage and misunderstandings seep into our everyday world. And again, it's not to say we should shame these people. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you have to have a law degree to practice law. But you don't have to have a kinesiology degree to practice kinesiology. Okay? So that's a big hurdle we face. I'm going to start this conversation by asking a simple question. What does the biceps brachii do? What does it do? If we just ask that question, what does it do? And listen, this is a no shame. Like, tell me what you think the average person would say if I asked them what the biceps brachii does. What do you think they would say? Bicep. Okay, no, you're good. You're good. Biceps curl. What if we went more specific? Like, what does it do as a muscle, not necessarily as an exercise or how to work it, but if we just said, what does that muscle do? Like, we know what the heart does, right? It pumps blood. What does the biceps do? You gave me an example of how to work it. But flexes the arm, right? You'll hear. Sure, you've heard that before? Like, it flexes the arm. Now, right away, we're like, arm? What does arm mean? Like, we've never, in all of the months we've spent practicing joint motions, we never had arm flexion. Okay, so that's kind of the first kind of thing that seeps in, arm, leg. So the first thing is that you've probably heard before that the biceps flexes the arm. I've heard that too, a lot of times. So the first thing we need to correct is this, right? Arm doesn't flex. What flexes? Elbow. Okay, so first thing we'll do is we'll change this out and we'll replace it with elbow. Now, The bicep flexes the elbow. I want to go to your example of curls. So we know that we're working the biceps when we do curls. Now, elbow curls, hamstring curls. Sometimes we call flexion of the knees hamstring curls. Sometimes we call it forearm curls. You see how there's there's fast and loose flexion muscles when we were kids? Okay. So the biceps flexes the elbow. With him? Biceps, flex my elbow. Now what? Exactly. Now what? My bicep flexed my elbows. Now what do I do? Do I bring it back down? Do I stay here forever? What would I do next? Let's say I wanted to do 10 repetitions and I start and I do 1. What do I do next? Okay. Hey, y'all are with me. Look, guys, I'm not judging. This is facts of our verbiage out in the real world. I'm going to have extension of my elbows. Always get the T's and the S's confused. Now, if I said my bicep flexes my elbow, then it's logical to say, well, then my tricep extends my elbow, right? Well, you've heard that before, tricep extends, bicep flexes. But if I'm extending my elbow, am I working my tricep? Okay. If I turned on my triceps, I would sling the bar down to the ground. Because gravity's already trying to extend me. So if you're doing a curl, would you work bicep coming up and tricep coming down? Or would you work the bicep the whole time? This is part of our conversation. This is part of our riding the bike. Let me ask you this. If we were doing side raises, right? We have some dumbbells, we're doing side raises. Would you be working the muscles that pull up to go up and then the muscles that pull down to come down? Or would you be working the same muscles the whole time? It's a cool conversation, right? If you're on a leg extension machine, which you're going to find out, Grace, why I love the word leg extension machine. I don't like it. Because what's a leg? What's a leg? But if you're on the machine, the leg extension machine, would you be working different muscles as you extend versus flex, or would you be working the same muscles? You're working the same muscles, right? Like when you go to a machine and it says this machine targets these muscles. They don't say when you do this motion, it's these muscles, and when you do the other motion, it's these other muscles, right? When you go into a machine, it just has one specific set of muscles targeted. True. So when I'm doing curls, I'm working the same muscles. I feel it in the same place. When I'm flexing, I feel it on my bicep. And when I'm extending, feel it in the same place in the bicep. In fact, you guys have heard that term negatives, right? You're doing negatives. So the first thing we need to understand is that when I'm doing an exercise, I'm having different motions, flexion and extension, but I'm working the same muscles. Do we agree? So if I'm working the same muscles, but I have different motions, I can't say that the bicep just flexes the elbow. Because sometimes it'll be working and I'll have extension. Or how about this one? If I'm doing overhead tricep stuff, right? I'm over my head and I'm using my tricep. We're good? If I say bicep just flexes or just does flexion, well, I know for a fact that when I'm flexing my elbow, I'm working tricep, right? So in that regard, how can the bicep only flex when I just showed you two different ways that that's not always true? I can have extension using my bicep, and I can have flexion using my tricep. Does that make sense? And it's okay if it doesn't make sense. Hey, riding the bike, it's okay. If we agree that I'm working bicep the whole time, and we agree that I'm working tricep the whole time, and in both of those exercises, I have flexions and extensions. But in both of those exercises, I had different muscles that I was targeting or using, right? So the tricep in this case was on or was working. I was working it, I was targeting it for both flexion and extension, because I have to have flexion and extension to do a full range of motion. And in the case of the curl, I'm going to also have flexion and extension. So I can't say this specific muscle does this specific motion. It can't be a two-variable equation. But it can be a three-variable equation when we put in the context of a type of contraction. And that's what you guys have not gotten. You may have had contractions defined for you or introduced to you, but you've never had it explained to you. And that's my job. Because contractions, understanding contractions, really understanding contractions, this is what's going to amplify your skills as a therapist, as an athletic trainer, as a strength coach. There's going to be instances in the clinic. Who works in clinics right now? There's times where you just need to do isometric stuff. There's going to be times where you just want to emphasize concentric stuff. There's times where you just want to emphasize eccentric stuff. So my job is going to be to teach you how muscles truly work through the context of their contraction types. So what I've tried to do is simplify. We have a work equation that you guys have probably been introduced to in high school physics or college physics. Don't freak out. Physics, I understand. Physics doesn't have to be hard if we don't have to solve for X, but we just have to understand how the different variables affect each other. This goes up, that goes up. This goes down, that goes down. Let me give you an example. 5 times 2 equals 10. If this changes, this has to change. If this variable stays the same and this goes up to 4, this has to go up. This goes up, that goes up. That's all physics is. It's just understanding how different variables affect other variables. So our work equation, work is force times displacement. For us, our work equation is muscle contraction type. That's a type of work. Heck, we use that term. We're working these muscles. These are interchangeable. And in fact, sometimes, again, we'll do negative. What do you think negatives mean? A negative work. So we use these terms interchangeably. I'm just trying to explain where they come from. So muscle contraction types is directly proportional to the actual muscles that you're going to be using. I'm going to define that. We call those our agonists. The muscles that we turn on to do a job. Like in the case of the curls, we're turning on certain muscles. and it's more than just the bicep. Spoiler alert. And the displacement is our joint motions. Now, this is the part where you guys hopefully are confident with. You should know your flexions and your extensions and your abductions and your adductions and your internal and external rotations. That's what we spent all this time learning. This, I'm going to simplify for you. There's a lot of skeletal muscles in the body, and we're going to learn most of them in biomechanics. But I'm going to make this easy for this. We got three options: isometric, concentric, and eccentric, right? But I'm going to explain what they mean. I'm going to explain how they get their names. And then we're going to take these variables and we're going to make sense just like an equation. If you have any two variables, you have the third. What I mean by that is if I gave you that, I don't have to give you the third variable for you to know the third. If you have two variables of a three-variable equation, you have the third variable. If you know this and you know this, you know this. Okay? So, leading you forward, you know this. I'm going to teach you how to see this. And once we have this and this will be solved for. It will be given to you on a platter of consistency. And there is 0% error because it's physics. Because it's an is. Because it's math. Now, just because it's math, again, I'm not going to ask you to solve for a number, but I need you to trust that, again, if you know this and you know this, you know that. Okay. Muscles, skeletal muscles, all muscles, can only pull. I'm going to let you digest that for a second. Muscles can only pull. Right away, you're like, well, Campbell, can't I push on things? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Bones can push on things because you got muscles pulling on them. Sand. I can push on the ground with my feet, but it's because I have muscles pulling on my bones. So muscles can only pull. So that means they're producing force through tension, pull force. It's like pulling on ropes. There are two, and all of this is in your notes, or in your PowerPoint, but I just want you to listen. I really do. A muscle can generate pull force through two different means. It's like having a hybrid car where some of it could be gasoline and some of it could be electric. Our muscles can generate pull force because of the contractile components, like the little cilia, the little actin and myosin, right, doing all the wizard physiology stuff that I'll never understand. Some Harry Potter stuff. But you know what I do understand? That those little cilia, actin, myosin, calcium, all that stuff, the more you sap it with electricity, the more it pulls. I know that. For those of you in the clinic, you know you've slapped electrodes on yourself and cranked it up, and the more you crank it up, the more it contracts. It's that, but just you have electrodes inside your body. It's the same concept. The second way that your muscle can create pull force is through the inert. Inert just means it's not innervated through electricity, and that's the stretchy rubber band materials that's inside the muscle, your tendons, your epimysium, paramysium, endomysium. You remember that from biology? All that stuff, all the mysiums, the shrink wrap stuff, are actually just extensions of the tendon. So you have inert tendon, which is like TheraBand, and it passes through the muscle, and then it comes out the other side. It's like a shrink wrap. The tendon, we call that elastic. It's like we call a TheraBand elastic. And the part that's before or after the muscle, we call series elastic because it's in series. So you think about if you lined up when you were in elementary school to go to lunch, you would line up in series, one person after the other, you'd line up and you go to lunch. And then the stretchy rubber band-like stuff that's parallel to the contractile components, we call that parallel elastic components. You'd line up in parallel if you were playing Red Rover. You ever played Red Rover as a kid? Line up side by side. So the combination of the contractile components, the stuff that responds to electricity, and the inner stretchy stuff that doesn't respond to electricity, it responds to length change. You take a TheraBand, stay. You take a TheraBand and you lengthen it, it pulls more. You take some muscles in the back of your leg and you lengthen it, it pulls more. So muscles can only pull. If muscles could pull and push, you would only need half of the muscles in your body, if you think about it. Like in other words, if my bicep could pull and push, why would I need a tricep? So the fact that muscles can only pull, that means we have to have muscles that pull in every direction of joint motions that we have. Think about that for a second. If you had a puppeteer and you want that puppet to move in all the different ways the puppet moves, you have to have strings that pull in every direction of motion. This is where it's actually going to get easy once you learn to ride the bicycle. For the purposes of this class, we're not going to say biceps and triceps. Campbell, why don't we say biceps and triceps? Everybody else says it. Well, my answer to that is, anybody ever seen the movie Coco? In Coco, you die 2 deaths. You die of physical death. You remember the second death? That's right. That's right. It's going to be a quick death for me. Hopefully not. Hopefully you guys remember. The second death is when the world forgets you existed. And that's how I feel sometimes about other muscles in the body. Meaning, bicep gets all the love. Because the bicep, metaphorically and literally, is superficial. It's on the outside. Everybody sees it. But there's a muscle underneath the bicep called the brachialis. That's a powerhouse of an elbow flexor. And you have other muscles, brachioradialis, pronator teres. You have other muscles. So think about it. If all of these other muscles get forgotten about and never get spoken of, do they exist? And the answer is, of course they exist. But if all we ever do is say bicep, tricep, glutes, hams, core, shoulders, and when you guys are practicing your kinesiology, there's going to be times where there's specific muscles that you might, whoa, what's a quadratus femoris? What's a semimembranosus? What's a pronator quadratus? If all we do, metaphorically speaking, as practitioners, is carry around a hammer in our toolkit, we better hope that all of our problems require nails. So what we have to do is acknowledge that the bicep is part of a team, part of a group, part of a group of muscles. When I'm doing curls, I'm not just working bicep. It's like saying Michael Jordan won 6 championships. That is true. I'm not saying I'm not working my bicep, but Michael Jordan was part of a team called the Chicago Bulls, and there were other players on that team. I'm not saying he wasn't the best player. I'm not saying he wasn't a prime mover. But if all we ever do is mention Michael Jordan, we lose to history who else was on that team. So what I have to do is condition you to get out of the habit of saying bicep and tricep and get into the habit of acknowledging there is a group of muscles that I'm working. That's a team. I'm working a team of muscles at my elbow. I'm working a team of muscles at my shoulder. I'm working a team of muscles at my knee. I'm working a team of muscles at my hip. I'm stretching a team of muscles at my cervical. Every joint motion is not done by one muscle. Once we can get the hang of seeing agonists, which is just muscles that we're targeting, muscles doing a job, muscles that we are working. Once we get the hang of seeing the teams, in biomechanics, we're going to learn the players. You're going to learn the different players. And unlike sports, you have some players that play for multiple teams. I guess you could, you get traded. But in the human body, you get traded you could get traded every minute, back and forth. What I mean by that is, I'm going to teach you some muscles have certain crossings where they can pull this way, and this way. You already know some of these. Anterior deltoid, I've heard that word before. So the anterior portion of the deltoid is a flexion puller, an abduction puller, and an internal rotation puller. We're going to get to that in biomechanics. So I need to recondition your brains to see muscles as teams based off of how they pull, not as individual muscles. How are we going to group these teams? Some say it's complex, but I think it's simple. But I'm biased in my thoughts. What we're not going to do is associate names based off of random things like our skeletal muscles. Let's think about them for a second. Like biceps brachii. So we have the brachial part of the brachial pulse, brachial artery. So it's an area of the middle of the arm. And it's a two-headed, that's what sep means. It's Latin for cephalic. Two-headed muscle in the brachial part. All right, some names have Latin. That's cool. Some muscles are named off of origins and insertions. A muscle called the sternocleidomastoid muscle, because it has a sternal and clavicular origin, and it runs to your mastoid process. Different, all right? Some muscles have, and Grace will tell you, these are my favorite muscles. Some muscles have direction of pull in their name. Love them. Pronator teres pulls in a direction of pronation. Pronator quadratus, love it. You have a muscle called the supinator. Love that muscle. You have some adductor muscles, adductor longus and magnus and brevis. Love those muscles because they have pull in their name. First lesson of this lecture is that we can't associate a specific muscle with a specific motion. Because again, the bicep can do extension. when it's working eccentrically, as I'm going to teach you on Monday. The tricep can do flexion when it's working eccentrically, as I'm going to teach you on Monday. So what can we do? If we can't say these muscles have purpose, function, jobs, if we can't say it's based off of a specific motion, because we just said that muscles can be working during different motions, then what can we associate muscles with? And this might be semantics, but we've got to learn to ride the bike. What muscles do all the time is pull in specific directions of motion. It's a candy cigarette. Let me give you an example of what I mean. Why is an elevator called an elevator? My sons would say, because it brings you up. And I'm like, that's super cool. How are you going to come back down? How are you going to stay on the 5th floor while you get off and people come on? You're not going up. You're staying put. Does that elevator stop working when it's letting you off? How many cables is tugging on that box? And what direction is that cable pulling? Do we need a cable to yank it down? I hope not. So think about it. One cable pulling up can influence motion both up and down. Welcome to the world of skeletal muscles. An elevator is called an elevator not just because it brings you up. It's because that cable influences motion in all ways by pulling up. Even when it lets you down, it's still pulling up. How do I know? Because if we snip that cable, gravity is going to bring you down. And I don't think you're going to like the speed at which gravity brings you down. Biceps. Why do we call it an elbow flexion puller or a flexor? Because not only can it flex and bring you up, but it can also let you down while still pulling in the same direction. That's weird. That's weird. Wait, you're telling me something that's pulling in the direction of flexion is going to let you extend? Yes. That's weird. That's why it's called eccentrics. Because eccentric is not what you're expecting. Someone who teaches eccentrically, someone who dresses eccentrically, someone who acts eccentrically. Prism with the tism. It's a great gift. Eccentrics is named because it's not what you're expecting. Something pulling up is letting me down. Something that's pulling in the direction of elbow extension is making me flex. That's weird. That's how it gets its name. Concentrics is what's supposed to happen. So you think about how these words originated. A concentric circle is just bringing a point back to meet up the other point. Bringing a point up to meet the other point. Concentrics. It's what's supposed to happen. The muscle is doing what it's supposed to do. It's shortening, it's pulling while it's trying to bring those 2 points together. But while it's trying to bring those 2 points together, it can let those 2 points get further away. That's weird. That's eccentric. You know what's the easiest one? I wish they were all named like this. Isometric. That's lovely. Same length while still doing a job. So let's use the elevator as our example. You have a cable pulling in only one direction. It's pulling up. It's an elevation puller. Scapular elevation. It's an elevation puller. You get on the elevator. You press 10th floor. The cable brings you up while pulling up. That's what's supposed to happen. Bringing 2 points together. Concentric contraction. The elevator is pulling up and it's making you go up. You get to the 10th floor. Doors open. You get off. People come in. Is that cable stop pulling? Still pulling. It's preventing you from falling down. If I hold this position, I'm doing the curls and I just hold this position for a second, my muscles are still working. They are preventing my elbow from extending. They're still doing a job. Isometric, thank you, elevator, for preventing me from dying. People get on. They hit the first floor. This is the part that's weird. Something pulling up is letting you go down. You don't have a cable yanking you down. You have a baby, you're going to put it in the crib. You're not going to do this. You're going to use the same muscles that brought the baby up. You're going to use the exact same muscles to let the baby go down. Something pulling up is going to let you go down. That's weird. That's eccentric. I'm going to teach you how to see these things. I just want to introduce you to the concepts. Great. So I'm going to teach them how to see these things, right? And we're going to do practice after practice after practice. So the so what? In a nutshell. How did I get in this nutshell? Austin Powers. I'm going to teach you how to see the muscle group that is working, the agonist. And we're going to do a lot of different exercises. I'm going to teach you how to prove the team that is on, that is being activated, that's being innervated, that's working, contracting, all same things. I'm going to teach you how to see it. I'm going to teach you how to prove that in this case, the muscles that are pulling in the direction of elbow flexion, we're going to call them our elbow flexors, plural, not insinuatorial motion, multiple muscles that are pulling in a direction of flexion because I could see that if they didn't, my elbow is going to extend. Simple concepts. Thought experiments. Sitzschleifen, as Einstein would call it. I'm going to teach you how to see these things. And then once we identify the agonistic group, because there's always multiple muscles, then we're going to do what we do best. Is the elevator going up or is it coming down? Am I flexing or extending? Am I abducting or am I adducting? Am I internally or am I externally rotating? Am I right lateral or am I left laterally bending? And if you have this variable and you have this variable, you will be able to prove contraction. It will be literally given to you on a silver platter. You won't have to guess. It's an is. It's proved. Contractions are always, I say always, just my experience of 20 plus years of teaching. Contractions are tough to understand because you've never been given tools to see them and understand them. Why do contractions matter? I was thinking the same thing. Contractions matter for a lot of different reasons. If a rope is going to snap or break, is it going to be because it's shortening, or is it going to be because it's being pulled apart? Pulled apart. So with eccentrics, you're going to have muscles that are being pulled apart. That's what eccentrics is. Think about it. Muscles can only pull. So that means if I had a rubber band and I left the rubber band on the table, the rubber band can't lengthen itself. But once I lengthen it, it can shorten itself. So muscles being pulled apart, you're going to have a lot more micro trauma, delayed onset muscle soreness, damage. Strength coaches, you may want that. Therapists, you may not want that at certain times, right? In fact, for some people, one of the biggest reasons they drop out of new programs is because they can't handle the delayed onset muscle soreness. The DOMS. It hurts so much, they're like, I'm never doing that again. Personal trainers, I think sometimes, it's just my 2 cents, which means 2 cents. Personal trainers sometimes think, well, I want my client to feel that they worked, right? I don't want them to be sore. When they can't get out of bed or they don't come back, right? Just something to consider. Also to consider that you are a young, athletic person. You may be working with older people. You have to remember, it's about the person. We had precedent for this when we're looking at joint motion. It's about them, not you. They're right, they're left, not your right, your left. Same thing with soreness. Just because you can handle delayed onset muscle soreness doesn't necessarily mean everybody else can. Things to consider. So seeing the eccentrics and the concentrics, and eventually we're going to see plyometrics, which is just simply a sequence of contractions, not a separate contraction, a sequence. You're going to learn all that stuff. It's going to be You learned something today without writing notes? Monday you can write some notes. But I encourage you to just think of some of these concepts. Think of some of these concepts. Next time you're exercising and you're doing a machine, say, wow, I'm using the same muscles to influence 2 different motions. So how in the world can the same muscles be responsible for different motions? If this stays the same and this changes, that has to change. Different contraction. Same muscles influence different motions through different contractions. Concentric, eccentric. The same muscles. Yes? You have a good day.